notified that time, the leases standard was Ind AS 17. It was not Ind AS 116. It was Ind AS 17, right? And globally, it was IAS 17. So after few years, when the standard was changed globally, so outside India, International Accounting Standard Board had changed IAS 17 to IFRS 16. So consequently, we have also changed Ind AS 17 to Ind AS 116, right? This Ind AS 116 was applicable from 1st April 2019. Okay, so it's been 4 years when this Ind AS 116 was notified and made applicable. If I compare Accounting Standard 19 with the old Ind AS 17, there was no major difference. But if I compare AS 19 with Ind AS 116, there is a major difference. The lessee accounting has been completely been changed, right? There is no classification of operating lease and finance lease in lessee accounting in Ind AS 116 or IFRS 16. Okay, so every lease is single lease. So there is a single lease model where the lessee has to capitalize right to use asset. The lessee has to capitalize right of use asset and credit lease liability. So in layman sense, whatever finance lease accounting we are doing in AS 19, that finance lease accounting is applicable in every scenario in Ind AS 116 in case of lessee accounting, right? So this was the biggest change in Ind AS 116, and we have discussed in detail that why it changed, what was the reason for change, right? So we have discussed all those things. Friends, then we discussed that this standard, right? This standard, the title of the standard is leases. What is meant by leases? So for every agreement, for every lease contract, there must be 4 elements. Number 1, there must be a contract, right? Contract between the two parties, two or more parties, but those parties are known as lessor and lessee. Lessor are generally the owners of the property who are providing the property or who are providing the asset on a lease basis. Lessee is generally the tenant who is acquiring the asset on a lease basis, right? There must be 2 parties. So we discussed this aspect in the last class. There must be 2 parties, lessor and lessee. Then we discussed there must be a transfer. Transfer of what? If the property is transferred, ownership is transferred, it is not a lease, it is a sale, right? So the right to use is transferred. In Ind AS 116, the concept is not right to use. The concept is right to control the use, right? Right to control the use of an identified asset. So we discussed the meaning of identified asset, and we also discussed the meaning of right to control the use, right? Then we discussed the period of time, means lease term, right? There must be a lease term over which the accounting has to happen. So we will be discussing this lease payment today. Then there must be a consideration. And when I say consideration, means lease payment should be there. And again, we will be discussing this lease payment in detail, right? Friends, so 2 aspects we have covered in the last class. One is what is meant by identified asset and what is meant by right to control the use of an asset. To summarize and to just for the sake of revision, identified asset means those assets which are explicitly or implicitly mentioned in the contract, right? For example, in case of all the property contracts, the address of the property, the detail of the property, the area of the property is mentioned in the contract. So that is a explicit. What is meant by implicit? For example, if the lessor has a single asset, he has a single property, single asset, and that asset has been constructed only for the purpose of the lessee, or that asset has been constructed in the premise of the lessee itself. Okay, so it is understood that that asset is given to the lessee and that asset cannot be provided to anyone else. So even though if the details of that asset has not been mentioned in the contract, it is implicitly implied that that asset is subject to a lease, right? So number 1, it has to be explicitly or it has to be implicitly mentioned in the contract. It has to be implicitly mentioned in the contract, right? Number two, the lessor does not have a substantive substitution right. What is meant by substantive? Substantive means practical right to exercise. Substantive means exercisable right, right? The lessor should not have a substantive substitution right. Means lessor does not have an exercisable right to replace the asset. Lessor does not have a right, exercisable right to replace the asset. For example, if something which is mentioned in the contract that car bearing registration number DL10X2Y, this car is given on a lease basis. It means the lessor cannot change this car, right? The lessor cannot replace this car with another car while providing this asset to the lessee. Okay, but if it is only mentioned that the lessor has to provide a Toyota Innova car, right? In that case, the lessor is free to replace the car. The lessor is free to provide any car to that lessee. It means the lessor has an exercisable right to replace the car. Okay, and lessor must get benefited from that replacement. For example, if it is mentioned that this particular registration number car is provided to the lessee and the car got broke down and now lessor is providing another car, so in this case you cannot say that the substantive substitution right exists. Why? Because in this case the lessor is helping to the lessee since the car has broken down, and that is why the lessor is providing another car. And in this case you will also appreciate that lessor is not getting any benefit out of this. Rather, lessor has to spend some extra money on the repair and maintenance of the car, right? So this replacement is not for the benefit of the lessor. This replacement is a I would say force replacement, where the asset is damaged, the asset is needs repair, and that is why lessor is replacing this asset with another asset, right? So this was the concept of identified asset, friends, and we discussed two examples of identified asset, right, and substantive substitution right. The second one is right to control the use of an asset. Friends, there is a difference between right to use and right to control the use. For example, Salesh is my friend, okay? Salesh asked me that, sir, can you please provide me your car? I said, yes, Salesh, you can use my car, okay? Since I am traveling for a week outside India, and you can use my car. Now, what happened? While providing the keys of my car, I told Salesh, see, you cannot take this car out of Delhi, right? You should use this car in the area within Delhi only. You should not drive this car after 8 p.m. Okay. So I am telling him that you cannot take this car out of Delhi. Let's say you cannot take this car to Gurgaon, Noida, or whatever. You should not drive this car after 8 p.m. Right? I am telling him that you cannot carry any luggage, or luggage, I mean to say, you cannot use this car like a luggage car. Okay. And you cannot only 4 people are allowed to sit in this car. You should not take 5 people in this car. And whenever you have to fill the petrol in this car, please get the petrol filled in the dedicated. So I am providing an address to the petrol pump, and please get the fuel from that petrol pump only. So I am giving the direction to Salesh, and I have put so many restrictions, and I am giving the direction. Now, whatever direction I have given to him, is it protective in nature? Answer is no, right? Why? Because the first direction I have given to him, you cannot take this car out of Delhi, right? This is a private car, okay? And you can drive this car all across India, right? So there is no regulatory prohibition or restriction, but I am putting a restriction. I am directing him, I am controlling the use, that how he will use that car, right? I am saying that please don't drive this car after 8 p.m. Is it a regulatory prohibition? Answer is no. You can drive this car at 11 p.m. Midnight. So wherever you want to drive, at whatever time you can drive. I am telling him that please get the fuel from this dedicated fuel petrol pump only. Is it some regulatory prohibition restriction, or is it required by the car? Answer is no. There are so many petrol pump, right? You can get the petrol from any petrol pump, right? So I am directing the, I am controlling the use of that car. I am giving so many direction to the Salesh, right? Now my question to all of you, question number one, whenever I'm providing the keys to the keys of the car to Sailesh, whether he is getting a right to use, whether he is getting a right to use. My question is whether he is getting a right to use. Yes or no? Whether he is getting a right to use. Yes or no, friends? Neha is saying yes, sir. Rahul is also saying yes, sir. Sailesh is saying yes. Kusuma is also saying yes. I got 7 answers so far, and everyone is saying yes. You are right. Since I have given the keys, he got the right to use. My second question, whether he got the right to control the use. He is using the car. That is absolutely correct. He got the right to use the car. That is absolutely correct. Right. But whether he is controlling the use, he is not controlling the use. I am controlling the use, because I am directing that how this car has to be used and for what purpose the car has to be used. Is that clear? So right to use is there, but right to control the use is not there. Right. Right to control the use is not there. Now I believe you guys have understood the difference between right to use and right to control the use. Okay. So friends, when I'm saying that right to control the use, two conditions needs to be seen in the contract. For example, you are auditing a client where there is a lease contract, right? Where there's a machine. Let's say your client has taken a machine on a lease basis, and now you are arguing whether the lease accounting under Ind AS 116 has to be there or it has not to be there, right? Because now you all have understood under Ind AS 116, whenever there is a lease contract, you have to capitalize right of use asset on the basis of present value of the lease rental over the lease term, right? The meaning of lease rental we will discuss, the meaning of lease term we will discuss in detail. But you guys have understood that this Ind AS 116 accounting is different than AS 19 accounting, where for every kind of a leases, we have to capitalize right of use asset over the future lease rentals. Over the future lease rental means on the basis of present value of the future lease rentals, right? So right to control the use of an asset means who have a right to direct the use of the identified asset, right? Right to direct the use means who is telling that how and for what purpose the asset has to be used. That, and number two, who is having a right to obtain substantially all the economic benefit from the use of the identified asset. For example, if your client has taken a machine on a lease basis, you are asking few questions. First of all, you are asking, is it an identified asset? You are looking at a lease contract and you have concluded that yes, it is an identified asset. Why? Because in the lease contract, this asset is mentioned and this asset is installed in the premises of the lessee. So the lessor cannot replace this asset, because if the lessor wants to replace this asset, lessor has to incur a huge expenses in dismantling and installing, right? So he cannot replace this asset, right? So it is an identified asset. Now, Shruti is the auditor of that client, and Shruti is asking to the accounts manager, sir, do you have a right to control the use of an asset? The account manager is saying, madam, I am a chartered accountant who has passed CA final examination in 2010. At that point of time, Ind AS were not there. And even Ind AS 116 was not there, madam. The question which you are asking, this standard came in 2019 only. So please, can you provide some light? What you are asking in this aspect? So then Shruti is asking, then Shruti has explained, sir, who is telling that how this asset has to be used and for what purpose this asset has to be used? So accounts manager is responding, madam, the lessor has given us this asset, right? And this asset is for the purpose of production of goods, production of X product. Okay. So we are using this asset for the purpose of producing X product. Okay. The lessor has only told us that please do the required repair and maintenance at the reasonable intervals, right? Because this machine requires some greasing, oiling, right? Putting some lubricants after every 30 days of the use, right? So we have to just do that. Okay. Otherwise, the entire production, that how we are using this machinery, right? And of course, this machinery is for the purpose of producing X product. So for how many hours we have to run this machinery. So we are controlling the use. So we have to use as per our own desire. Okay. So the whatever lessor has told only from the protective purpose, so that his machinery not get damaged. Okay. So Shruti has told, okay, it means you are controlling the right to use. He said, yes, madam. Then Shruti has asked another question, that who is getting the economic benefit from using the asset? Then again accounts manager asked, madam, what do you mean? Then Shruti has replied, sir, whatever production you are doing, whatever output you are producing, whether this output, entire output belongs to you or it belongs to the lessor also. Then the account manager is responding, madam, do you know what you are saying? Since this asset belongs to us, I mean to say we are providing a lease rental for using this asset. So whatever product has to be produced, it should belong to us, right? So the main product, byproduct, whatever this machine is producing, it is not belonging to the lessor, it is belonging to us. The primary output, secondary output, whatever it is. She said, okay. Then she asked another question, sir, the product which you are producing, the government is providing a subsidy on the manufacturing or producing of this product. So who is entitled to receive this subsidy? Whether the lessor is getting this subsidy or you are getting this subsidy. Then the accounts manager is replying, madam, this subsidy, the government is providing this subsidy on the manufacturing or producing of the goods. We are producing the goods, right? We have only taken this machinery on a lease basis. We are putting our raw material, we are producing the goods, we are putting our efforts, and we are receiving the subsidy. We are entitled to receive the subsidy. Then Shruti is saying, okay, it means you are controlling the right to use of this asset, as well as you are getting majorly all the benefits from using this asset. He said, yes. So Shruti told, okay, sir, it means it is an identified asset and you have a right to control the use of an asset, use of this asset. It means the lease rental which you are providing, it comes under the category, it comes under the kitty of Ind AS 116. It means we have to apply the accounting and reporting provisions of Ind AS 116. Is that clear? Is that clear? I believe with this real life conversation example, you guys are able to understand this fact. Yeah? Yes or no? Clear in mind or clear from mind? Clear in mind. Okay. Right, friends? Then another aspect which may be given in the examination, it is given that the operating instruction, for example, this is a specific kind of a machine, and lessor and lessee has agreed at the time of inception of the contract or commencement of the contract. The lessor and lessee have agreed, this machinery has to be operated in this manner, right? It is written in the contract. Then Shruti is again asking, sir, your lessor has, put some instruction that how to use this asset and for what purpose this asset has to be used. So then the account manager is replying, madam, it is not that lessor is saying, it is that we and lessor, means lessor and lessee both have agreed at the time of commencement of the contract. And you will appreciate that this is what we mutually decided and discussed at the time of commencement of the contract, and lessor does not have a right to alter these instructions, right? Shruti said, okay, in this case, in standard, there is a provision which is given that if lessor and lessee has decided some operating instructions at the beginning of the contract, and lessor does not have a right to alter those decisions, in that case, it is said that the right to control the use of an asset is also provided to the lessee, right? So this is what it is given. Then friends, we did some examples, and let's do one more example, then we'll move to the new concept. Right to direct the use of an asset. Customer X enters into a contract with supplier Y. And I have told you in the last class that in this standard, you will find the word customer, supplier. Why? Because Ind AS 116 or IFRS 16 generally talks about, or it talks about transfer of control of use, right? Transfer of control of use. Okay. So that is why they are using the word customer, supplier. But customer means lessee, supplier means lessor. Customer X means lessee enters into a contract with supplier Y means lessor to use a vehicle for a 5-year period. The vehicle is identified in the contract. So it is written that it is an identified asset. And further it is written supplier Y cannot substitute another vehicle unless the specified vehicle is not operational. Means if it is breakdown, then only the supplier will provide the another vehicle, otherwise not, right? Means the lessor does not have a substantive substitution right. Lessor does not have a right to replace the asset. Okay. So this paragraph tells us that it is an identified asset. Now we need to analyze whether the right to control the use of an asset belongs to the lessor or it belongs to the lessee. Customer X means lessee operates the vehicle, that is drive the vehicle, okay, or direct others to operate the vehicle. For example, hires a driver. So it is customer X who himself drives the vehicle or he has hired a driver, right? And he is giving instruction to the driver that how this asset has to be used. It means customer X means lessee himself is using the asset. Lessee, again customer X, decide how to use the vehicle within contractual limitations, right? For example, throughout the period of use, customer X decide where the vehicle goes, as well as when or whether it is used and what it is used for. Customer X can also change this decision throughout the period of use. It says that within the contractual limitations, okay, it is customer X who is deciding how this car has to be used and for what purpose this car has to be used. It is customer X who is deciding. Supplier Y prohibits certain uses of the vehicle, for example, moving it overseas, right? Supplier Y means lessor. Lessor prohibits certain use of the vehicle. So lessor has given some protective instructions. He said that you cannot take this vehicle to China, Japan, Sri Lanka, Thailand, right? And you cannot modify the vehicle, right? For example, you cannot make this car as a Tarzan Wonder car to protect its interest in the asset. So if you read this para, the supplier or lessor does not tell you that how to use this asset and for what purpose this asset has to be used, right? He is not telling these things. What he is telling, he is only telling the things which protect his asset, right? For example, even it will be your own car. You cannot take your own car to China, Japan, Sri Lanka, or Thailand, right? Because you don't have right or permit to take this car outside India. Okay. And if it is your own car, right? So if you want to see this car like this car only, of course you will not modify that car. Okay. So since this car belongs to the lessor, he does not want to get this car modified. As simple as that, right? If you are using the rental house, you cannot do any modification, right? You cannot say that I have to cover my balcony and I have to extend my room. You cannot do that. Okay. So these are only protective rights, and protective rights are allowed. Okay. But if I talk about the rights while using the asset, it belongs to the lessee only. So friends, in this case, of course, it is an identified asset and the lessee has a right to control the use of an asset, right? So it means this asset comes under the lease contract. How this solution is drafted? Let's read this. Yes, customer X has a right to direct the use of the identified vehicle throughout the period of use because it has a right to change how the vehicle is used, right? It has a right to change how the vehicle is used, when or whether the vehicle is used, where the vehicle goes, and what the vehicle is used for. So it means it is customer X who is deciding how the vehicle is used and for what purpose the vehicle is used. So this is the lessee who is controlling the use of the asset. Supplier wise limit on certain uses for the vehicle and modification to it are considered protective rights that define the scope of customer X use of the asset, but do not affect the assessment of whether customer X direct the use of the asset or not, right? I hope it is clear to all of you, friend. Yeah. Shruti is saying Tarzan Wonder car was a good one, sir. Yeah. Shall I move forward? I believe you guys have well understood these two concepts, identified asset and right to control the use of an asset, right? We did around 6-7 examples from ICAI study material, apart from the layman language example, which I have taken to make you guys understand this concept, right? Now, friends, let's move to the next concept. Friends, you must have heard about the concept of inception of the lease and commencement of the lease. Have you heard about these two concepts, inception of the lease and commencement of the lease? These concepts were there in accounting standard also. Have you heard about these concepts? Yeah. Okay. Friends, I'll make you understand with the help of one example. This inception of the contract and commencement of the contract, lease contract. So, for example, Hemant. Hemant is from Mumbai. Okay. So Hemant came to Delhi for the purpose of preparation of CA final examinations, right? So he came to Delhi for coaching, for preparing for CA. So he came to Lakshmi Nagar. Lakshmi Nagar is an area where lot of CA students are there in Lakshmi Nagar. They used to stay in Lakshmi Nagar due to coaching and other things. So I have a property in Lakshmi Nagar. So Hemant came to me in the month of February. Okay. And he told me that, sir, I am looking for a accommodation. Right. I told him that yes, I have a second floor which is vacant as of now. So he said, okay, sir. So can you please provide this second floor on a lease basis to me, on a rental to me? I said yes, but there is a problem, and I am getting the renovation of that second floor, and it will take another 1 month, right? So this second floor is good to lease by 1st April. He said, okay, sir. So I just came for looking for the accommodation, and I'll come with my bag and baggage in the first week of April only, right? So he said, sir, but my request is not to provide this property to anyone. And if you want to enter into an agreement, we can do that, right? So he came on 15th of February. On 15th of February, we have discussed the main principle or the main terms and condition of the contract, right? So I told him that the rent will be 20,000 rupees per month. It is a 2-bedroom flat, right? And you have to give me a security in the tune of 1 month, right? And these are the instructions which I am giving it to the Hemant, and he's agreed to those instructions, right? So it means on 15th of February, we have decided the entire terms and condition of the lease contract, the main principles of the lease contract. Okay, that how much rent will be there, how much security will be there, what will be the rent escalations in future, right? What is the tenure of the lease, what are the renewal periods. So we have discussed all the aspects. So on 15th February, we have decided the main principles of the lease contract, right? We have discussed the main terms and conditions of the lease contract, right? And I am submitting the keys to Hemant on 1st of April. The rent will start from 1st of April, right? In this case, you guys need to tell me what is the inception date of the lease and what is the commencement date of the lease. I have just given you this example. I have not told you the concept, right? But with the logic, you need to tell me, if I have given you this example with 15th February and 1st April, you need to tell me what is the inception of the lease and what is the commencement date of the lease. I am waiting for the answer. Jigar is saying, sir, commencement date is 1st April. Kusum is saying inception date is 15th February. Hemant is saying commencement date is April, inception date is February. All of you have given a right answer. All of you are correct. Inception date is a date when the main terms and condition, when the principal terms and conditions of the lease is agreed, right? Or even if I would have entered into a contract agreement with Hemant on 15th of February, right? That would be the inception date of the lease. I have not given him the asset. The rental has not started, right? Even though if he would have given the security deposit to me, still it is not a commencement of the lease, it is an inception of the lease, right? Okay, so friends, inception date is the earlier of the date of a lease agreement or the date of commitment by the parties to the principal terms and condition of the lease. Okay, is that clear? So on 15th of the February, both the parties have either entered into an agreement or both the parties have decided the principal terms and condition of the lease. So inception date, on the inception date, the entities will identify a lease, whether this will be a lease or not. First of all, it will be a lease or not. How will you decide it will be a lease or not? As per this standard, whether there will be identified asset or not, whether the lessor will have a substantive substitution right, who is controlling the use of the asset, right? And on the inception date, lessor will classify the lease into finance or operating lease. Why only lessor is written here? Because from the lessee perspective, there is no concept of operating lease or finance lease in Ind AS 116. But from the lessor perspective, yes, the classification still exists. You will be able to understand when I'll cover the lessor accounting. Okay, is that clear? So on inception date, the parties will decide whether it is a lease contract under Ind AS 116, and the parties will decide, I mean to say lessor will decide whether it is a finance lease or operating lease. On the commencement date of the lease, commencement date of the lease is the date where lessor provides the underlying asset, identified asset, available for use. On 1st April, I am giving him the keys to use the asset, right? So on 1st April, Hemant is getting the asset for use. Okay. So it is the commencement date of the lease. On this date, the parties will decide what is the lease term, because the accounting will start, right? For example, if Hemant is applying Ind AS 116, how Hemant will capitalize right of use asset? So first of all, Hemant will decide the lease term, whether it is 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Then he will look at that how much rental I am paying. Then he will discount those rentals as on 1st April. He will capitalize right of use asset. He will credit lease liability, right? So on this date, the parties, lessor and lessee, will determine the lease term and recognize the lease. Recognize the lease means recognize the right of use asset and lease liability. Recognize the right of use asset and lease liability, right? Right of use asset and lease liability. Okay. Is that clear? So I believe the concept of inception date and commencement date is clear to all of you. On the inception date, the parties will identify, is it a lease contract? The lessor will then identify, is it an operating lease or a finance lease? On the commencement date, the parties will decide the lease term, because the accounting is depending on the lease term. And since lessor has given the asset, lessee has received the asset for use, so the accounting will also start on 1st April. The first accounting entry has to be made on 1st April. Right? Let's move on. Guys, this is a very detailed standard. If you read accounting standard, I mean to say Ind AS, you will find this standard very complex, right? But if you understood this standard, if you will understand this standard, you will find this standard very easy. And when you relate this Indian accounting standard with your real life, right? If you able to visualize, if you able to, connect this standard, this is a very, very, very easy standard. Now coming to the lease term. So friends, as I told you, the lease contract has 4 parts: parties, lessor and lessee, right? And we will be discussing the lessee accounting, we will be discussing the lessor accounting. Then we discussed the asset and use. So we discussed the identified asset, we discussed the right to control the use. Then we discussed the period, means lease term, which we are going to discuss in detail now. And the another aspect is consideration, which is lease payment, right? So after lease term, we will be discussing the lease payment. Okay. So what is meant by lease term and why this lease term is very important? Because on the basis of lease term, if you decide what is my lease term, is it 1 year, is it 2 year, is it 5 year, is it 10 year? So on the basis of that lease term, you will estimate the rental, you will estimate the rent, and you will discount the rentals to the present value, and that present value of the future lease rental will be your right to use asset, right? So what is a lease term? A lease term is a non-cancelable period of a lease, which includes the period beginning from the commencement of the lease and includes the rent-free period provided by the lessor to the lessee, together with both period covered by an option to extend the lease if it is reasonably certain to exercise the option, and period covered by an option to terminate the lease if the lessee is reasonably certain not to exercise that option. This is the language of the standard. And if you read this language, which is starting from, which is getting, just give me a minute, which is starting from this to this, you will get confused, right? Although in the presentation, the standard, the language of the standard has broken into the parts, still you will not be able to understand, this definition of lease term properly. So now I'll give you an example and you guys will tell me that what is the definition of this lease term. Let's say one of the student, let's say Shruti, came to Lakshmi Nagar, okay, and she has taken a rental accommodation, and the lessor, the landlord, told Shruti that you need to give me a commitment for at least 2 years, right? So the agreement is happening for 3 years. There is a 3-year lease contract. The agreement is happening for 3 years, but the lessor said that you have to be given me a commitment for 2 years. Commitment for 2 years, what does it mean? So lessor said, if you will leave this property, if you will leave this property, or if you will move from this property after 2 years, then there is no any problem. You can just give me a 1 month notice and you can vacate this house. But if you will vacate this property before 2 years, you have to give me the rental for the balance period. Balance period means the remaining period up to 2 years. For example, the agreement has been signed for 3 years, but the lock-in period, what is meant by lock-in period? Lock-in period means a period for which you have to pay the rental to the lessor, right? If you will use or you will not use the property, still you have to pay the rental. For example, after 1.5 years, Shruti decided to move out from this property. Why? Let's say, so after 1.5 years, Shruti parents are forcing her to stay at her maternal uncle's house, which is in Preet Vihar, close to Lakshmi Nagar. Right. So after 1.5 years, she decided to move to her maternal uncle. Now what happened? Since the lock-in period is 2 years, so for the balance 6 months, she has to pay the rental to the lessor, irrespective of the fact that she is not using this house. Means she has to pay the penalty, right? Means 2-year rental she has to pay, even though she is using the asset or she is not using the asset, right? If she has already used this asset, she has already paid the rental for 2 years, then it is okay. She can give just 1 month notice and she can move away from the contract. Now the point is, out of this 3 year, what is the non-cancelable period? Non-cancelable period does not mean that you cannot move away from the contract. Non-cancelable period means the period which you cannot cancel. Means if you are moving from the contract, if you are breaching the contract, you have to pay the penalty. Penalty means you have to pay the rental to the extent of the non-cancelable period, to the extent of the lock-in period. Right? So in this example, out of 3 years, what is the non-cancelable period? Whether the entire 3 years is a non-cancelable period? Answer is no. After 2 years, he can cancel the contract, lessor can cancel the contract. So what is the non-cancelable period? In this case, the non-cancelable period is how much? 2 years. So the non-cancelable period is 2 years, right? Non-cancelable period is 2 years. I believe it is clear to all of you. Yeah. And this is what it is written in the slide. The non-cancelable period. So it starts from commencement date. So, sir, we understood this non-cancelable period, right? Which is 2 years in this case, which start from commencement date till the lock-in period. Now what happens? You must have seen the malls, right? If a new mall is constructed and a lot of showrooms, lot of outlets are coming in that new mall, like McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Domino's, okay, Bikaner Wala, Haldiram's, Raymond's, okay, Reliance Fresh, Big Bazaar was there. So a lot of new outlets are coming in these malls, right? And you must have seen, it's not like a switch on switch off model. So if McDonald's has to come in that mall, so they have to first of all construct, renovate, right? And it has to look like McDonald's. You must have seen all the McDonald's have same kind of a look and feel. All the Raymonds have same kind of look and feel. All the Pizza Hut, Domino's, Bikaner Wala, Haldiram, they are kind of a same kind of a look and feel because their furniture belongs to a specific design, colors, right? So if an outlet has to come in that mall, it has to spend time in the fit out period, furniture, fixture, renovation, construction. It has to spend some time. So normally what happened, these malls are giving them a rent-free period, because if today Haldiram has to bring its outlet in that mall, it will take another 6 to 10 months, 6 to 7 months to make the outlet ready, right? And in those 6 to 7 months, there is no revenue which will be flowing to Haldiram. So the mall authority or the mall management companies, it says that don't worry, whatever is your fit out period, let's agree to that, like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. We will not charge any rental in the initial period because it is your fit out period. After 6 months, we will start charging the rental. Okay. So what is this initial 6 months? What is this initial 3 months? What is this initial 3 months or 6 months? This initial 3 months or 6 months is known as rent free period. This initial 3 months or 6 months is known as a rent free period. So what is a commencement date? Right? The date on which the underlying asset has been provided to the lessee for the use. Okay. For example, 1st April. 1st April 2020 is the commencement date. Now, in the next 6 months, the lessee has to use this asset for getting ready for the purpose of earning revenue. The lessee has to renovate, construct. The lessee has to use this as a fit out period. So this 6 month, 1st April 22 to 30th September 20, this 6 month is known as a rent free period. This 6 month is known as a rent free period, right? Okay. And the lessor and lessee has agreed a non-cancelable period of 5 years. The total contract is for 10 years, but the 5-year period, is non-cancelable period. Means if the lessee wants to move away from the contract in the initial 5 year, the lessee has to pay the rental for a balance period up to 5 years, right? So the lock-in period is 5 years. So if I split this initial 5 years, so my first 6 months is a rent-free period, and another 4.5 year is my non-cancelable period, right? So non-cancelable period is total 5 year, where 6 months is a rent-free period, or if contract says that first 6 months is a rent-free period, and after that, after 5 years, there is a lock-in period of after 5 years. Okay. So the total 5.5 year, where 5 year is a non-cancelable period, 6 months is a rent-free period. So this non-cancelable period, this lease term is equal to rent-free period plus non-cancelable period, right? 5.5 year. Total is 5.5 year. Is that clear to all of you? Is that clear to all of you? What is meant by lease term? Non-cancelable period, which is 5 year, plus rent-free period, which is 6 months. Is that clear? Not clear? Clear? Plus optional renewal period plus optional termination period. Optional renewal period plus optional termination period, right? So to explain this, let me take you on the Excel file, and please confirm if my Excel file is visible. We are discussing the concept of lease term. What is meant by lease term, right? What is meant by lease term? So to explain the lease term, let me give you an example. Ambience Mall Limited, Ambience Mall Limited entered into a contract with Haldirams Limited to provide a space for outlet on a lease basis for 10 years, right? The initial 6 month will be a rent-free period, and further 5.5 years will be a non-cancelable period, and if any party defaults, they have to bear the rental cost up to this period, right? Okay, what is the lease term with respect to Ind AS 116? What is the lease term with respect to Ind AS 116? Ind AS 116 says that lease term is equal to non-cancelable period plus rent-free period. What is my non-cancelable period in this case? My non-cancelable period is in this case is 0.5 years. This is in years, means आधा साल, 0.5 years. Let me write here. What is my rent-free period? My rent-free period in this case is 5.5 year. What is my total lease term? My total lease term is how much? My total lease term is 6 years. My total lease term is 6 years. Okay, it is 6 years. Yeah, is it clear? My total lease term is 6 years. Right? If you will see, out of 10-year lease contract, 6 year is a lease term. 6 year is a lease term. Okay. Lease term to be considered for the purpose of Ind AS 116 accounting. Non-cancelable period plus rent-free period. Right. To again, to extend with this example, right? To extend with this example, let's say Ambience Mall Limited entered into a contract with Haldirams Limited to provide a space outlet on a lease basis for 6 years. Okay. The initial 6 months will be a rent-free period, and further 5.5 year will be a non-cancelable period. And if any party defaults, they have to bear the rental cost up to this period. The lessor has also provided a renewal. The lessor has also provided a lease renewal option. The lessor has also provided a lease renewal option for a period of 2 years. For a period of 2 years, and agreed that in this 2 years, the rental cost will be less, will be 20% less than the market rentals. What is the lease term with respect to Ind AS 116? Right. Friends, Ind AS 116 says that your lease term is equal to non-cancelable period, right? Plus non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period, ORP, optional renewal period. Okay, optional renewal period. Non-cancelable period, let me write a complete word here. Non-cancelable period, rent-free period, optional renewal period, right? Non-cancelable period, okay, rent-free period and optional renewal period, okay, RFP plus ORP. When you have to take this optional renewal period only when the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option. Now you all are chartered accountant, okay? You are in CA final, you are as good as chartered accountants. Only the result will decide, okay? But let's say a student who is appeared in the examination, okay? If the result is positive, he becomes a chartered accountant. If result is not positive, he is still a CA student. But do you think the day when result came and that day will convert you from student to a professional, student to a chartered accountant, क्या आपका दिमाग कुछ उस दिन बदल जाता है? आपकी नॉलेज बदल जाती है? आपकी नॉलेज, आपका दिमाग, you as a person will remain same, but you become a chartered accountant, right? It decide only on those marks and results. So applying your logic, and I have given you this situation, and being a CA final student, you all have some articleship experience as well. I have given you this example. I told you the definition of lease term is non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period. And this optional renewal period has to be taken in the definition of lease term only when the lessee is reasonably certain that yes, I will exercise the renewal option. Now you tell me in this case whether it is reasonably certain that yes, this renewal option will be exercised. Please tell me, what is your view in this case? What is your view in this case? If you will be the lessee, will you exercise this renewal option or you will not exercise this renewal option? Sir, sitting today, how will we say that after 6 years we will exercise this next 2 years? When you do your business, when you run your company, run your business, will you run your business only for 1 year or 2 years? You will run your business for long run. If after being a chartered accountant, when you start your practice, when you take your office on a lease basis, probably you are thinking about the long-term perspective, right? Because wherever you start from your business, the moment the business become older and oldest, so you will start creating a goodwill out of that business. Of course, you are thinking about the long run. So if today I am saying that, if you will avail this renewal option, I'll give you a market, I will give you a rental which is less than 20% of the market rental. Okay. In that case, friends, what do you think? Whether, because I have to be in a leasehold premises, whether I'll exercise that option or I should not exercise this option. There are high chances that I will exercise the option because I am getting the premises at less than 20% of the market rental. Right? Right, friends? So in this case, what should be the lease term? Please tell me. I hope my voice is clear. So Mr. Astik, are you able to hear me? Please confirm on the chat box because I'm not getting the response from the student. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. My question is, in this case, whether there is a reasonable certainty that yes, the lessee will exercise this renewal option or not. Is there a reasonable certainty that lessee will avail the renewal option? Answer is yes. The lessee will avail the renewal option because the lessee will get the property on a rental which is less than 20% from the market rental, right? So there are high chances that the lessee will exercise the renewal option. Second, for example, you have got a premise where you start your office and you have spent a huge money on the leasehold improvement. You have spent a huge money on the leasehold improvement. So in that case, what do you want? You wanted to continue for a long term, right? You wanted that renewal option, even though if it is not at a lesser than the market rent, because you are aware कि अगर मैं इस प्रॉपर्टी को छोड़कर भी कहीं जाऊंगा तो मुझे उतना ही रेंट पे करना है. So why not to continue in this property? Because there is a relocation cost, there is a leasehold improvement cost, right? So there are high chances because you have done a huge amount of leasehold improvement, you have spent a huge amount in the renovation of that office, right? So in that case, there are high chances that the lessee will avail the renewal option if renewal option is there in the contract. In this case, what is the lease term? The lease term is 0.5 years, 5.5 years, and 2 years, right? This is the total is 8 years. This is the lease term. This is the lease term. This is the lease term. Okay. Is that clear? Is it clear, friends? Now I am further extending this example. Or let's say I am taking this example. Ambience Mall Limited entered into a contract with Haldirams to provide a space for outlet on a lease basis for 10 years. Initial 6 months will be a rent-free period. Further, 5.5 year will be a non-cancelable period. And if any party defaults, they have to bear the rental cost up to this period. Right? In the last 4 years, the lessee has the option to terminate the lease by giving only a month notice, right? The lessee has the option to terminate the lease by giving a month notice, right? Okay. And the lessee has incurred a huge leasehold improvement in this premises. What is the lease term with respect to Ind AS 116? Now the definition of lease term is non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period plus optional termination period plus optional termination period. Optional termination period. Okay. Optional termination period. Only when the lessee is reasonably certain. Please see that what am I writing? Lessee is reasonably certain to not to exercise the termination option. In the upper case where the renewal option is there, I have written that when the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option. In case of optional termination period, I have written that when the lessee is reasonably certain to not to exercise the termination option. This is a 10-year contract, right? The first six year is rent free and non cancelable. So we all understood 6 साल तो होगा ही होगा, right? In this case, the optional renewal period is not mentioned in the contract. Okay, let's say the optional termination period. In this case, the option for termination is 4 years. Okay, after 6 years, you can walk away from the contract. There is no penalty. There is nothing which has to be paid. But the question is today whether you need to capitalize this right of use asset for 10 year or 6 year. The question is that. So friends, again, I'm asking you that what should be the lease term in this case, right? The facts which I have given you, I need to understand from you guys what should be the lease term in this case. I have only told you that, lease term definition is you have to take optional termination period also if there is a reasonable certainty that the lessee will not exercise the termination option. In this case, whatever facts I have given you, in this case, do you think that the lessee will move from this contract after 6 years? Or lessee wants to stay for another 4 years? Think logically. Think logically. Okay, so let me correct that. 5.5 is non-cancelable and 0.5 is rent-free. I think so okay, so let me correct everywhere. So rent-free period is 0.5 and NCP is 5.5. Okay. Yeah, I have corrected that. Yes. What is your answer in this case? What is your answer in this case? So this non-cancelable period is clear to everyone. This is 5.5 year, right? Rent period is clear to everyone. This is 0.5 year, half year. There is no optional renewal period. There is no optional renewal period. Okay. What about the optional termination period? Whether we should take this into the consideration for lease term or we should not take that? I am waiting for your answer. Rahul has responded that, sir, we need to consider this 4 year as a lease term. Why? Why, Rahul? So Ridhima has also responded with the logic that this 4 year needs to be taken as there are high chances that the lessee will not avail the termination option. Lessee will continue in this premises. You are right, Ridhima, because the lessee has incurred. You are right, Geeta. The lessee has incurred a huge leasehold improvement, huge expenses on the renovation of that asset, that premises. So of course, lessee wants to continue even though after 10 years lessee wants to continue because the cost is huge. If Haldiram has to, construct its outlet, the cost is not 5 lakh or 10 lakh. The cost is in crores. The cost is in crores, right? In this case, the optional termination period, although it is optional, but it is also required to be taken into the consideration. Okay. So the total lease term in this case is how much? The total lease term is 10 years. It is 10 years. The total lease term is 10 years. Right? It is 10 years. The total lease term is 10 years. I hope it is clear to all of you, friends. I hope it is clear to all of you. So now if you read this lease term, you will be able to understand this. Lease term is the non-cancelable period of a lease which includes the period beginning from the commencement of lease and includes the rent-free period provided by the lessor of the lessee, right? Together with both. Period covered by an option to extend the lease means optional renewal period, if the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise that option, and period covered by an option to terminate the lease, optional termination period, if the lessee is reasonably certain not to exercise that option, right? So this is the meaning of lease term. Commencement date, non-cancelable period from commencement date, plus rent-free period, plus renewable period, plus period covered by an option to terminate if it is not exercisable. Right, friends? Let's discuss this illustration number 16 and then we'll move forward with the new concept. Entity ABC enters into a lease for equipment that includes a non-cancelable term of 6 years and a 2-year fixed price renewal option with future lease payments that are intended to approximate market rates at lease inception. There are no termination penalties or other factor indicating that entity ABC is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option. What is the lease term? So entity ABC enters into a lease for equipment where non-cancelable term is 6 years and there is a 2-year of a renewal option. Okay. And these lease rental will be at the market rental, which is given in the question. There is no termination penalty. Okay. After 6 years, there is no termination penalty. And there are no other factor which indicate that entity ABC is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option. Means there are no factor which will tell you or which is saying that the renewal option there is a reasonable certainty to exercise the renewal option. There is no such factors are there. The question is, what is the lease term? Friends, what is the lease term? Is it 6 year? Is it 8 year? So the definition of lease term is non-cancelable period, which is 6 year, plus rent-free period, which is not given in the question, plus optional renewal period, if there is a reasonable certainty to exercise that option. There is no reasonable certainty to exercise this option. So whether this 2 year will be taken or this 2 years should not be taken. It should not be taken. So what is the lease term? The lease term is 6 year. The lease term is 6 year. Kusuma is saying lease term is 8 year. Kusuma, lease term is not 8 year. Lease term is 6 year. It is itself given in the question that there is no indicator, there is no facts which indicate that the lessee has a reasonable certainty to exercise the option. Right. And it is also given that the renewal rentals will be at market rental. तो अगर मार्केट रेंटल ही होगा और कोई टर्मिनेशन पेनल्टी नहीं है तो लेसी अगर चाहे तो दूसरे प्रीमाइसेस में भी मूव कर सकता है ना. बट हैड इट बीन गिवन that the lessee has incurred a huge leasehold improvement, or agar ye likha hota the lessee has entered into an agreement with the government, right, or lessee has an obligation to stay in this premises for the next 4 years also, let's say in the renewal period also, in that case we have to take this renewal period because there is a reasonable certainty that he will exercise that option, right? Scenario B, entity XYZ enters into a lease for a building which includes a non-cancelable term of 8 years. So non-cancelable period 8 years. And a 2-year market price renewal option. So 2-year renewal option is there, but it will be at market price. Before it take possession of the building, entity XYZ pays for leasehold improvement. And the leasehold improvement are expected to have significant value at the end of 8 years. And that value can only be realized through continued occupancy of the lease property. What is the lease term? You tell me. Here it is mentioned in the question that the entity has done some leasehold improvement, and even after 8 years, the value is significant of those leasehold improvement. The entity cannot take those leasehold improvement with them. Okay. The entity cannot take those leasehold improvement with them. And it has a significant value. And how this value will benefit to the lessee? By continuing use of that property only. So in this case, non-cancelable period is 8 years, which is given. Rent-free period 0. Optional termination period 0. Optional renewal period. Tell me whether this 2-year will be taken into the consideration or will not be taken into the consideration. As per concept, optional renewal period is taken into the consideration when there is a reasonable certainty that lessee will exercise that option. In this case, what do you think? If you will be in the place of lessee, what you will do? Yeah. You're right, Aksha. It is 10 years. Optional renewal period of 2 years has to be considered because there is a reasonable certainty that the lessee will exercise the option. Scenario C. Entity PQR enters into a lease for an identified retail space in a shopping center. The retail space will be available to entity PQR only for the month of October, November, and December during a non-cancelable period term of 7 years. Friends, if you have visited any mall, and I'm sure that you guys have visited mall, right? So during the Diwali, Christmas, so during the festive season, let's say October, November, December, you must have seen some shops of like carpet, like some what would I say? Some artistic items, some textile item. You will see some shops or outlets which is there in the ground floor of the mall. Right? And it is not for the full year. It is only for 2 months or 3 months. And the classic example is those people from northeast India, people from northeast. Uh, so friends, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So have you seen that people from northeast India, they are just putting their stall for 3-4 months for the woolen clothes? It is not for the full year. It is only for 3-4 months, right? So what happened? Like in this case, entity PQR enters into a lease for an identified retail space. The word is identified means there is an identified asset in a shopping center. And this retail space is available only for the month of October, November, December because they are into woolen clothes, right? during a non-cancelable term of 7 years. So for the period of 7 years, the specified period of 3 months, they have given a dedicated space. Okay. And lessor agrees to provide the same retail space for each of the 7 years. So thus, for each of the 7 years, that space is dedicated to this entity, this lessee, for 3 months. So what is the lease term? The lease term is 7 multiplied by 3 months. 21 months is a lease term in this case, right? It is not 7 years, it is 21 months. Is that clear? Is that clear, friends? Is it clear or not clear? Is it clear? Very good. Very good. So we discussed the concept of lease term, where we have discussed the lease term includes non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period if there is a reasonable certainty to exercise the renewal option, plus optional termination period if there is a reasonable certainty to not to exercise the termination option. Shruti is saying, sir, can you please explain scenario A again? Shruti, in scenario number A, what is happening? Non-cancelable period is 6 years. And the renewal period, optional renewal period is 2 years, which is on the basis of market rental only. And it is also given in the question that there is no termination penalty, means the lessee, if wants to move from the contract, it can move from the contract, right? So there is no termination penalty. And there are no other factor which indicate that the lessee has a reasonable certainty, the lessee has a reasonable certainty to avail the renewal option. There is no indicator, there is no factor which says that there is a high chances कि lessee उस ऑप्शन को एक्सरसाइज करेगा. क्वेश्चन ही कह रहा है कि कोई हाई चांसेस नहीं है कि लेसी उसको एक्सरसाइज करेगा. So it means we should not take that renewal option in the consideration, right? Now, friend, quickly we will discuss. So it's 8:23, I believe. Let's take a 7 minutes break, and after that we will discuss the few further concepts, right? So it's 8:23, 8:24 now. So let's have a break for 7 minutes, and we will start at 8:31. Okay. share this slide. I hope the slide is visible. So talking about termination, okay. So we talked about the lease term, which is non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period plus optional termination period, right? Now talking more about the termination clause, okay. Let's say, let me take an example. For example, Abdul. So Abdul is auditing a client. It's a listed company, and when he is reading a lease contract, the lease contract has given a right to terminate the lease to both the parties without any major penalty. Without any penalty. Okay. Let's say the contract is for 10 years, and after 6 years, I mean to say in the last 4 years, the parties can terminate the contract. The lessor and lessee, any of the party can terminate the contract. Any of the party can terminate the contract. Okay. So in this case, if both the parties have a both the parties have a right to terminate the contract without any penalty, in that case, optional termination period is not required to be considered, right? If both the parties, for example, lessee wants to continue, but lessor, since both the parties have the right, so in this case, lessor does not want to continue, right? In this case, the optional termination period is not required to be taken into the consideration. Is that clear? So if both the parties have optional termination period right, if both the parties have a right to terminate the optional termination period, in that case, this optional termination period is not required to be considered, right, for the lease term. If only lessee has the option, lessor does not have the option, only lessee has the option to terminate. In that case, you need to see if there is a reasonable certainty that the lessee will not avail the termination period, then you need to take the optional termination period into the lease term. Otherwise, you will not take the optional termination period into the lease term, like we have discussed earlier. Okay. So if only lessee has the right to terminate, you need to look at why lessee will terminate. Lessee क्यों terminate करेगा? अगर लेसी ने बहुत लीज होल्ड इंप्रूवमेंट पे स्पेंड किया है, या लेसर उसको लेसर मार्केट रेंटल पे उसको रेंट अगर दे रहा है, राइट, इन दैट केस द लेसी विल नॉट टर्मिनेट द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. द लेसी will be happy to continue the contract. Okay. So if both the parties have a termination rights, the optional termination period need not to be taken into consideration. If the lessee has the termination right, then you need to look at whether there is a reasonable certainty that the lessee will not avail the termination option. In that case, the optional termination period needs to be taken into consideration. If only lessor has the right, the lessee does not have the right, only the lessor has the right. So in that case, the optional termination period will always be taken into consideration as a lease term. Why? Because you are looking from the lessee perspective. Okay. So in that case, the lessee always wants to continue the contract. The lessee always wants to continue the contract. So in that case, the optional termination period needs to be taken into consideration, right? So let's further discuss with the help of this example. Suppose the term of the contract is 10 years and the non-cancelable or lock-in period is 6 years. Means the last 4 years is termination period. If the termination option is with the lessor, the termination option is only with the lessor, not with the lessee. In this case, what will be the lease term? Is it 6 years or is it 10 years? We discussed this. If the optional termination period right is with the lessor only, in that case, you have to take the full period as a lease term, right? Because the lease term shall be 10 years, because even after 6 years, the lessee would be contractually bound until 10th year. That is, lessee cannot refuse to make the payment till the expiry of the contract, and also has the right to use the asset until 10th year unless lessor terminate the contract. So as a lessee, agar main baat karu, I am the lessee. I have a contract with my landlord for 10 years. So as a lessee, I cannot terminate the contract. Only lessor can terminate the contract. So in my shoes, what is the situation? In my shoes, I am bound to pay the rental for 10 years. If the lessor will not terminate, I am bound to pay the rental for 10 years. So in that case, I have to take the cognizance of this situation. I have to take the lease contract period as 10 years. I have to take the lease contract period as 10 years, right? Clear? So if the option is with the lessor, then you need to take the full period as a lease period. If the termination option is with the lessee, then you need to see whether lessee is reasonably certain, whether the lessee is reasonably certain to not to exercise the termination option. In that case, the lease term will be 10 year. The lease term will be 10 year, right? Assuming that the lessee is reasonably certain to not to avail the termination option. But if the lessee is reasonably certain to avail the termination option, then the lease term will be 6 years, right? अगर आपको लगता है कि लेसी तो टर्मिनेशन ऑप्शन अवेल करेगा, इन दैट केस जो नॉन कैंसिलेबल पीरियड है 6 ईयर का लॉक इन पीरियड वो ही होगा. अगर आपको लगता है कि लेसी टर्मिनेशन ऑप्शन अवेल नहीं करेगा, in that case 10 year will be the lease term. But if both the party have the termination rights, then this termination period need not be to be taken into consideration. Then the lease term will be 6 year only, right? Is that clear? Is that clear? The termination period is clear. If both the parties have a right to terminate, then only non-cancelable period needs to be taken into consideration. I mean to say, the lease period should not be taken into consideration. The lease period should not be the optional termination period should not be taken into consideration. If the lessor has the right to terminate, in that case, from the lessee perspective, you have to take the lease term as a full year. If the lessee has the termination option, in that case, you have to take the termination period if the lessee is reasonably certain that he will never avail the termination option, right? Otherwise, you will not take. Is that clear, friends? Shruti, is it clear? Abdul, is it clear? Yeah. Shall I move forward? Yes. Now, for non-cancelable period, the concept is pretty clear. Okay. For rent-free period, the concept is pretty clear. But this optional renewal period and optional termination period, this is a matter of judgment. This is a matter of estimation. So don't you think, let's say for a long-term lease contract, 10 year, 15 year, don't you think for long-term contract of 10 years and 15 years, don't you think that you need to reassess these estimate and judgment? Let's say, I'll take one example here. There was a long-term contract of 15 years for the leases, right? There were so many companies which have a long-term lease contract because normally the businesses have a long-term lease contracts. Okay. So what happened after the lease? Friends, just give me a minute. Yeah. So prior to COVID, what happened? Let's say there was a long-term lease contracts, okay, where the optional renewal period was there, optional termination period was there, and the lessee was reasonably certain that yes, the lessee is going to avail the optional renewal period, and lessee was even going to not to avail the optional termination period, right? But what happened after COVID? After COVID, a lot of companies have vacated the space due to work from home model, right? And the lease rental has gone down significantly because there were a lot of space which was made available, and this lease rental has significantly gone down. So the lessor or the landlord who were not willing to reduce the lease rentals, the companies have started shifting from one place to another, right? And I have seen one real life scenario where HSBC Bank, right? So I was working in HSBC Bank in the year 2015. So they were having a huge building of 8-story building in sector 45 Gurgaon, where they are paying a huge rentals of, let's say, 140 rupees per square feet. I'm just taking an example. So after COVID, they have shifted to a new building near Cyber City, near Ambience Mall. They have shifted to a new building in comparatively a small space, right? Earlier they were operating in 8-story building. Now they are operating in probably 2-story, because a lot of people are operating from work from home. So now they are, working in a 2-story building with a lesser rental cost, like 100 rupees per square feet in a new building. So what happened in this case, the same HSBC building, the same HSBC who was thinking prior to COVID that yes, I'm going to avail the renewal option or I'm not going to avail the termination option, right? But after COVID, the scenario had changed. Now the space availability has increased, the rental has gone down, and the companies have started switching from one place to another. Why? Either due to the lower rental cost, second, either due to the lower requirement of the space. Okay. So due to the change in the facts and circumstances, due to the change in scenario, 2 years back, when we were thinking that while considering the lease term for the accounting purposes, we were considering that this 5-year renewal period is also my lease term. This 3-year termination period is also my lease term. Now the scenario has changed, right? So that is why, friends, standard says that after the lease commencement, the lessee is required to monitor the leases for significant changes that could trigger a change in the lease term, like this COVID trigger a change in the lease term. Or, for example, the scale of the business has gone down in the company and they are retrenching their employees, right? Earlier they were 1,000 employees, now they have 100 employees. So of course they need a smaller space at a smaller location. Okay. So the lessee is required to monitor the leases for the significant changes which can trigger a lease term. Largely, non-cancelable period will remain non-cancelable period. Rent-free period will remain rent-free period. But the changes will happen in the optional renewal period and optional termination period, right? So friends, it is required to be reassessed in the every year. It is required to reassess on a regular basis that, whether this reassessment is impacting my lease term or not, right? Whether it is impacting my lease term or not. Of course, it is for the cases where the circumstances is in the control of the lessee, right? Whether lessee is able to determine that yes, whether it is going to be changed or it is not going to be changed. Right? There are some scenario which is given for the reassessment of the lease term, and standard says that the lease term needs to be revised in these 4 circumstances. There is a change in the lease period. There is a change in the lease period, right? If the lessee exercises an option not previously included in the entity's determination of the lease term. Earlier, the lessee was not exercising the optional renewal period. The lessee was reasonably not certain, right, that the lessee is going to avail the optional renewal period. But now the lessee wants to exercise this option. Okay, why? Another example, after COVID, the lease rental has significantly gone down and the existing lessor has agreed to waive some portion of lease rental for the next 10 years, right? Because the financial health of the lessee has significantly deteriorated and lessor has agreed to support the lessee, and lessor told, don't worry, for the next 10 years, whatever market rental is there, you can pay me 25% lesser rent than the market rental, right? And of course, now there is a win-win situation and lessee wants to continue in the same premises, right? क्योंकि लेसर को भी प्रॉब्लम है ना, उसको उसको उतने उसको टेनेंट मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा. Example, lessor wants a 10% rent extra, but if his premises will remain vacant for next 1 year or 2 year, so he will have a rental loss for the next 1 or 2 year, and even he has to bear the maintenance cost also, right? Clear? Second, if the lessee does not exercise an option, if the lessee exercises an option which was not previously included, earlier it was not expecting, now he is expecting. Same way, now lessee is not expecting to exercise the option which he was earlier expecting to exercise. Right? Same way. So earlier, lessee was thinking that I should continue in this premises because the rental is very cheap, or rental is incommensurate with the market rental. Now, the existing lessor does not want to reduce the lease rental, and in market the rental has significantly gone down. So now lessee does not want to avail this this renewal option. Lessee only wants to complete the non-cancelable period, and then he will shift to the another premises. An event occurs that contractually obliges the lessee to exercise an option not previously included in the entity's determination of the lease term. An event occurs. For example, the entity, the non-cancelable period was 6 years and the 4 year was the renewal period, for example. And after 3 years, so 3 year period is still remaining, the non-cancelable period is still remaining. So lessee has entered into a the lessee has entered into a contract with a government company or with the government of India, where there is a requirement in the contract that the the lessee premises, right, or the supplier premises should not be changed for the next 10 years. So in this case, the lessee is contractually obliges to continue in this premises, right? Even though if he needs to pay the rental extra, right? So this event obliges the lessee to continue to exercise this option, which was not the case earlier. Or vice versa, an event occurs that contractually prohibit the lessee from exercising an option previously included in the entity's determination of the lease term. For example, the lessee was having a factory, the lessee was doing a production near Connaught Place in Delhi, right? So there was an area near Connaught Place, and lessee was doing a production there. So government, due to the pollution, government has come up with an announcement, and government said that you cannot operate near Delhi Zoo, near India Gate, near Connaught Place. You cannot do any manufacturing activity, right? You have to shift your factory from this place to industrial area. Like they have the industrial area in Mangolpuri, they have the industrial area in Bhawana, they have the industrial area in Narela. So in Delhi, there are some industrial area which has been identified as an industrial area, right? So in this case, since after this government announcement, the lessee is contractually bound to, to terminate this office space, so terminate this factory space, and to avail this factory, and so basically, and to terminate this space and to avail a new space in the industrial area, which was not the case earlier, right? So these are some situation and facts which is given in the question, that you need to assess your lease term. While assessing your lease term, largely you need to assess, you need to judge, you need to assess your optional renewal period and optional termination period, right? So let's discuss this thing with an illustration. Reassessment of exercise of lease renewal option. Retailer M enters into a 5-year lease for a building floor, followed by 2 successive 5-year renewal options. So basically 5-year is the existing lease term, and there are 2 5-year renewal options. So +5 +5. There are 2 5-year renewal options. Yes, +5 and +5. Okay. On the commencement date, retailer M is not reasonably certain to exercise the extension option. On the commencement date, retailer M is not reasonably certain to exercise the extension option. Right? Now, what happened? So when this lease contract was started, the lessee was thinking that I'll avail this option, I'll avail this this premises, I'll use this premises only for 5 years. मैं सिर्फ 5 साल use करूंगा and I will not avail the renewal option, right, for the next 10 years, 5 plus 5. At the end of the third year, but what happened after 3 years? Retailer M, means this lessee, extended to include another floor in the same building, another floor from year 4 due to a business acquisition. 3 साल के बाद क्या हुआ? 3 साल के बाद this lessee has acquired another floor, from year 4 due to a business acquisition. क्योंकि इस lessee का business बढ़ गया, they have acquired a new business, and that is why this lessee has acquired another floor from the year 4. And for this purpose, the lessee concludes a separate 7-year leases for an additional floor in the building already leased. So after 3 years, right, 3 years has gone. Earlier, the lessee was expecting I will be there in this building only for the next 2 years. But what happened? After 3 years, the lessee has entered into another floor, the lease for another floor for the next 7 years. Right. Is retailer M required to reassess the lease term in this case? Friends, at this point of time, after 3 years, the lessee business got expanded. The lessee business got increased. It got expanded, right, after 3 years. And that is why the lessee has taken another floor for 7 years, right? So don't you think if the lessee has acquired another floor in the same building for another 7 years, don't you think the lessee will require at least for another 7 years for this existing floor also? Don't you think that? Yeah, because the lessee business has increased, the bandwidth has increased, the capacity has increased, right? So in this case, due to these facts and circumstances, the reassessment is required whether the lessee is going to avail the renewal option or not. The lessee is going to avail the renewal option or not, right? So it is going to be reassessed. Ind AS 116 requires a lessee to reassess the lease term if there is a change in business decision of the company, which is directly relevant to exercising or not exercising an option to renew or extend the lease. In the given case, the retailer M at the end of the third year has extended to include another floor in the same building on account of acquiring another company or a business. As retailer M has entered into a fresh lease for another floor of a 7-year lease term, it is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option of original lease for a further 5-year term, right? Because the 5-year lease is there, further 5 year means total 10 year. So 3 plus 7 is 10. Okay? Hence, retailer M will have to reassess the lease term at the end of the third year. So there will be a revision in the lease term. I hope you guys have understood with the help of this example. Shruti, Abdul, Aksha, Rahul, Ridhima. Please let me know if you have understood this thing. Have you understood this thing? Have you understood the revision in lease term? Have you understood that the reassessment of the lease term is required on a continuous basis? Yeah. Rahul is asking, sir, when we are required to reassess the lease term? So Rahul, whenever there is a change in the facts and circumstances, like in this case, after the end of the third year, the entity has acquired a business. Okay. In that case, this reassessment is required because it is unlikely कि आप 3 साल के बाद सेम बिल्डिंग में आपने एक फ्लोर 7 साल के लिए लिया, तो जो एग्जिस्टिंग फ्लोर है उसको आप 2 साल के बाद तो नहीं छोड़ोगे। इसका मतलब देयर आर हाई चांसेस कि आप 5 साल का जो लीज टर्म है उसको भी अवेल करोगे, राइट? ओके, इज दैट क्लियर? Whether accounting will change, of course. For example, earlier we were thinking 5 year, you have capitalized right of use asset and lease liability only for 5 year, but now if you are thinking that yes, I am going to avail this option, so the remaining period is not 2 year, remaining period is 7 year, so your lease liability and right of use asset will change. and that I will discuss when I'll tell you the this lessee accounting, right? So right now we are only discussing the concepts. We are discussing the recognition aspect. When we will discuss the measurement aspect, then I'll cover this. Okay. Clear? Hemant Manoj has said yes. What about others? Is it clear? Not clear? Clear? Another illustration will make it clear. Reassessment of a non-cancelable period of a lease. Company N has taken 10 vehicles on a lease for an initial period of 5 years, right? They have taken 10 vehicle on lease. Initial period is 5 years. And renewal option of the lessee for a further period of 5 years at the same rental amount. And the renewal option is also there for 5 years. The remaining useful life of the vehicle as on commencement date of the lease is 15 years. So when the lessee has taken these vehicles on a lease basis, the life of the vehicle was 15 years. But they have taken these vehicles on a lease for 5 years with a further renewal period of 5 years. Okay. The company N has determined at the commencement date that it is reasonably certain to exercise the extension option, and hence it has taken a period of 10 years for the lease, right? So the company is saying that it is reasonably certain to exercise the extension option, and hence it has taken a period of 10 years for the lease. Okay. Friend, just give me a minute. Right, friends? So initially the lessee was reasonably certain कि हाँ ये 5 साल का मेरा लीज टर्म है और अगले 10 साल भी मैं रिन्यूअल ऑप्शन अवेल करूंगा. Okay. But what happened at the end of 4th year, there is an announcement by the government that all the cars of this particular model have to be discontinued from the road within 1 year due to the change in the pollution norms in the country. You must have heard about BS4, BS6 vehicle, right? Like in Delhi, BS4 vehicles are not allowed to be operated, for example. So when this lease was started, the life of the asset was 15 years, or initial original lease period was 5 years, and renewal option was 10 years. And the lessee was reasonably certain that I will use this car for the lifetime, means I will avail the renewal period also. But when 4 years was completed, the government has come up with an announcement, and government told that you cannot use this car on the roads for the after the next 1 year. So in this case, will the lease term will be reassessed in this case? Of course, yes. Why? Why lessee will avail renewal option, right? The lessee know that I will not be able to use the car after 1 year. So the original period was 5 years only, right? Why lessee will renew this renewal option? The lessee will not avail the renewal option, and hence the reassessment is required. Initially, the lessee has done the accounting on the basis of 15 years. Now the lessee has to do the accounting on the basis of 5 years. In the given case, as per Ind AS 116, the announcement by the government to discontinue the use of underlying asset will prohibit the lessee from exercising the extension option that was already included in the non-cancelable period by company N, and hence company N will reassess the non-cancelable period to exclude the extension option of 5 years. Right? So it is pretty clear, very simple. Right, friends? Is that clear to everyone? Is that clear to everyone? And now we are going to discuss the concept of lease payments. So far we have discussed the concept of lease term. So when we started with the concept of identified asset, then right to control the use, right? After that, we have covered the concept of inception date and commencement date. We understood the accounting starts from the commencement date. Then we understood that what is meant by lease term, and we discussed at length what is my non-cancelable period, rent-free period, optional renewal period, optional termination period. Then we have covered the termination part, that if the termination right is with the both the parties, then termination period should not be considered while calculating the lease term. If the termination right is only with the lessor, then in that case the termination period has to be considered in calculation of lease term. If the termination period is only with the lessee, in that case you need to see whether lessee is reasonably certain to not to avail the termination option, then it has to be considered. But if lessee says that no, I'll avail the termination option, in that case it is not going to be considered, right? Then we have discussed, whenever there is a change in the facts and circumstances, the lessee has to reassess the renewal period and termination period. The lessee has to reassess the lease term due to these two concepts. Okay. Now coming back to the new concept of lease payment. Friends, in the AS 19, you must have heard about a word minimum lease payments, MLP, minimum lease payments. In Ind AS and IFRS, the word is future lease payments, FLP, right? So concept is almost same, but the word there is minimum lease payment. Here the word is future lease payment. So we are going to discuss one of the leg of lease contract where we have discussed there are two parties, lessor and lessee. So we will discuss the accounting in the books of the lessee, accounting in the books of the lessor. Then there is a transfer of, identified asset. There is a transfer of right to control the use. So we have discussed that. Then the asset has to be transferred for a period of time, which is a lease term. And it has to be on the basis of a consideration, which is a future lease payment. So now we are going to discuss future lease payments, that what is meant by lease payments, right? So we are going to discuss this future lease payment or a lease payment from the perspective of the lessee as well as from the perspective of the lessor. Okay. So the definition of the lease payment from the perspective of the lessee is there are 5 lease payments. From the perspective of the lessor, there are the 6 lease payments, right? Now, what is meant by that? So from the perspective of the lessee, there are 5 lease payments. From the perspective of the lessor, there are the 6 lease payments. And to explain the lease payment, I'll start the concept with the help of a layman language example. Let's say Manoj has taken a car on a lease basis, right? I am the lessor, Manoj is the lessee. I am giving my car to Manoj on a lease rental basis. I am telling Manoj that Manoj, this contract is for a period of 10 years. Okay. And every year you need to pay me a annual rental of 1 lakh rupees every year. Okay. So Manoj has to pay me 1 lakh rupees annual rental every year. So what is this? This is a fixed lease payment. This is a fixed lease payment. So sitting today, I know that Manoj will give me 1 lakh rupees every year. And sitting today, Manoj knows that I have to pay 1 lakh rupees to Mr. Alok every year. Now in the contract, I have inserted an escalation clause. For example, today you are paying 1 lakh rupees to me and you have to increase this amount by 10% every year. So Manoj, if in the first year it is 1 lakh rupees, what is the amount which you have to pay me in the second year? So 1 lakh plus 10% of 1 lakh, 1 lakh 10,000, right? What is the amount which you are going to pay me in the third year? 1 lakh 10,000 plus 10% of 1 lakh 10,000, 1 lakh 21,000, right? So every year Manoj is escalating the lease rental which the Manoj is paying me. Every year he is escalating by 10%. So don't you think these escalations are also in substance fixed payment? 1 lakh rupee is the fixed lease rental. So in the contract, it is written that 1 lakh rupee is the lease rental, which is going to be escalated by 10% every year. After every 12 months, it is going to be. So Manoj, I believe my voice is audible to everyone. Yeah. Am I audible to everyone? Am I audible to everyone? Or not audible to everyone? Guys, am I audible? Okay. Okay. Manoj, I think there is some problem on your side because I got a response from a lot of students that I am audible to everyone. Right. What happened in this case? 1 lakh rupees the fixed payment. But I know sitting today, myself and Manoj both are aware that every year there is a 10% escalation on the last rental. Right? So in substance, this escalation amount is also a fixed payment. In substance, this escalation amount is also the fixed payment. Okay. So 1 lakh rupees the fixed payment plus 10,000 in the second year, 11,000 in the third year, 12,100 in the fourth year. This is also in substance fixed payment. Fixed payment plus in substance fixed payment. Okay. This is clear to everyone. Fixed payment plus in substance fixed payment is clear to everyone. I've also given an option to Manoj that after 10 years, you can purchase this car from me at a price of 50,000 rupees. Right? And Manoj knows that, the car is in good condition and I have to maintain this car. So I will maintain this car in a good condition. And of course, this 50,000 rupees is just a small penny of amount. Okay. So Manoj is reasonably certain that he will exercise that purchase option also. So there is an exercise price which is given in the contract that after 10 years, Manoj will be able to get this car at a 50,000 rupees. So there is an exercise price. And the contract is for 10 years. Okay. And if anyone who will walk away from the contract, okay, so there is a termination penalty. Manoj knows that after 8 years, I'm not going to avail this. I'm going to avail this termination option. So basically, after 8 years, I'm not going to use this property, use this car. Okay. And he knows that he has to pay me a penalty because there is a clause that after 5 years, so within 5 years, no one is able to walk out from the contract. You have to pay the full rental. But after 5 years, let's say if anyone will breach the contract, he will pay 1 lakh rupee as a termination penalty to the other party. So Manoj knows that, after 5 years, I'll not be able to continue this contract and he has to pay 1 lakh rupees penalty. Okay. He knows that. So this is the penalty amount and he is reasonably certain that he is going to pay the penalty. So this penalty for not exercising or this penalty for terminating the lease is also part of the lease payment, In the contract, Manoj is also giving me the residual value guarantee, right? For example, if he is using the car for 10 years, I have given the car to him for the lifetime. For example, the life of the car is 10 years and he is also using the car for 10 years. So as a lessor, I want him a residual value guarantee. That what is the residual value guarantee you are giving me? So he has given me a residual value guarantee of 25,000 rupees. He said, Alok, don't worry. I know that after 10 years, the car will be scrapped and at least 25,000 I'll give you from the scrap value of this car, residual value of the car. I'll give you 25,000 rupees. So he is also giving a residual value guarantee, right, to the lessor, to me. So if I talk about this entire thing, friends, what is the part of this lease contract? Number one, 1 lakh rupee is the lease rental. 1 lakh rupee is the lease rental, right? Which is a fixed payment. Escalation amount, which is 10% every year on the basis of the last release rental, is in substance fixed payment. Exercise price is again a part of the lease payment. Penalty, which is paying by the lessee to the lessor, is again a part of the lease payment. Okay. Residual value guarantee is again a part of the lease payment. Okay. Which lessee is paying to the lessor. These all are the payment which lessee is paying to the lessor. Okay. If lessee has given some incentive, for example, during the COVID period, lessor has given some incentive to the lessee. The lessor has given the rent waivers to the lessee. So those incentive has to be netted off from the lease payments. Okay. Is that clear to everyone? Is it clear to everyone? The meaning of the lease term from the perspective of the lessee is clear to everyone? Yeah? Yes or no? Shruti, is it clear to all of you? The meaning of the lease payment? Abdul, is it clear to you? Yes? Okay. Has confirmed, Rahul has confirmed, Neha has confirmed. Now, coming back to one more concept. Normally, what happened in the lease contract, when you see the lease contract, there is a concept of variable lease also. Variable lease payment also. For example, and you must have seen these examples. Let's say the lessor says, you know, when I was a student and when I was living in Lakshmi Nagar, so I was also living in a rental accommodation. So I was living with my 3 friends and we all were CA students. So the same 2-bedroom flat was there in Lakshmi Nagar, and what happened? So 3 friends were living there and they were paying a rent of 15,000 rupees. And when I joined them, so we become 4. And landlord told us that earlier you were 3 and you were paying me 15,000 rupees. Now you need to pay me 20,000 rupees, right? Because one more person has been added. So space has not increased, but the person has increased. The person has been added. So he was asking for 20,000 rupees. I told him that, see, I came here only for 3 months, right? So I'll take the coaching. I'll do my preparation. And after that, I'll again go back to my house, right? So I'll not be there for 12 months. I will be there for 3 months only. Landlord told me, okay. So whenever you come, for example, for this 3 months, I will charge 20,000 rupees when you will go. So I'll again come back to 15,000 rupees, right? It means the rent varies with the number of persons. So it is a variable lease, right? Or in some cases, what happened, there is a lease contract between the lessor and the lessee in the factory kind of an agreement where the lessor says that I will charge 1 lakh rupees as a fixed rental, right? Plus whatever revenue you will earn, you have to pay me 2% of that revenue as a rental. So 1 lakh rupees is a fixed rental, which has to be paid every year. If the lessor will earn a revenue of let's say 1 lakh rupees, he has to pay 2% of 1 lakh. So let's say the first 1 lakh rupees is a fixed rental. And if the lessor will earn 5 lakh rupees of revenue, he has to pay 2% of 5 lakh rupees to the lessee in addition of fixed 1 lakh rupees. So means 1 lakh rupees a fixed payment plus 10,000 rupees a variable payment plus 10,000 rupees a variable payment. Right? Okay. So this variable payment is depending on a revenue. In the next year, the revenue has been decreased and from 5 lakh it become 2 lakh. So now the lessee has to pay 2% of 2 lakh in addition to 1 lakh rupees. So it means the lessee has to pay 4,000 rupees extra. In the next year, this revenue become 10 lakh rupees. Now the lessee has to pay 2% of 10 lakh rupees in addition to 1 lakh rupees. So this is a variable rent. In addition to 1 lakh, whatever this lessee is paying to the lessor, it is a variable rent. It varies with the variance in revenue. Right? Standard says that if it is a variable lease rent, which is not depending on any index or a rate, right? In that case, it is not going to be included in the lease payment, and it has to be charged to the P&L as and when incurred. It has to be charged to the P&L. Now, what happened, friends? What is meant by if it is not depending on an index or a rate? What is meant by this? Friends, when you look at the lease contract, in some cases, the lease rental, the lease payment is dependent upon some index. For example, the lease payment is 100 rupees, the lease rent is 100 rupees, and it will increase as per the wholesale price index, consumer price index, as per the inflation. Okay, it will increase. So this increase in lease rental is dependent upon some index or a rate, So this has to be considered in substance a fixed payment, right? So the variable lease rent, which is depending upon an index or a rate, has to be considered as a part of the lease payment, like on the basis of inflation rate, on the basis of wholesale price index, on the basis of consumer price index. That variable rent has to be taken as a part of the lease rent. But if the lease rent is based on the quantity produced, based on the revenue, based on the number of people, so in that case, that lease rent has to be charged to the P&L. It is not covered in Ind AS 116 accounting. It has to be charged to the P&L as and when incurred. So when I joined that house in Lakshmi Nagar for 3 months, the additional 5,000 with the lessor is charging from me. That 5,000 has to be, charged to the P&L as a lessee. As a lessee, I'll charge to the P&L. Okay. It is not covered in the future lease payment. It means the present value of this lease rental is not going to be taken into right of uses. I hope it is clear to all of you, friends. Is it clear to all of you? Yes. Is that clear? Not clear? I'll take some illustration from ICAI study material as well. Don't worry about that. But is that clear? Yes. Let me take you on Excel file to talk more about the lease payment. Lease payment. So lease payment includes following. What lease payment includes? First of all, fixed lease payment. Lease payment plus in substance fixed payment plus in substance fixed payment. Okay. Plus variable lease payment on the basis of index or rate, right? Plus exercise price, if any, exercise price in case of a purchase option. So I have given, the lessor has given the right to the lessee the purchase option at the end of the lease term. Exercise price in case of a purchase option. Plus termination penalties which is paid by the lessee. Plus what? Residual value guaranteed by lessee. So this is from the perspective of lessee. Right? From the perspective of lessee, these are the payments which should be considered for calculating the lease payments. Right? What are the lease payments? Same way, the lessee is doing the accounting when lessee is paying these amounts. So what is the lease payment from the perspective of lessor? From the perspective of lessor, of course, this lease payment which lessor is receiving, right? In substance, fixed payment which lessor is receiving. Variable lease payment on the basis of the index or rate like wholesale price index, consumer price index. Exercise price which lessor will be receiving. Termination penalty which lessor will be receiving. Residual value guaranteed by the lessee which lessor will be receiving. These all are lease payment from the perspective of the lessor also. But in addition to this, there is one more aspect. From the lessor perspective, lessor is saying that if you are guaranteeing me that you will pay me 25,000 rupees as a residual value, of course that will be the lease payment for me. But if you are not guaranteeing, your holding company is guaranteeing me, matlab residual value guaranteed to the lessor by a third party who is a related or unrelated to the lessee. For example, the holding company, subsidiary company of this entity is giving a guarantee to the lessor. Don't worry, we will pay you 25,000, we'll pay you 30,000, right? So if residual value guaranteed to the lessor by any third party who is either related or unrelated to the lessee. For example, the lessee has not given any guarantee. The parties who is related to the lessee has not given any guarantee, but some third party has given the guarantee, right? They said that, for example, that scrap dealer, he has given a guarantee that when you will give this car to me, I'll pay you 25,000 rupees or 30,000 rupees, right? So from the lessor perspective, one more aspect will come because the asset belongs to the lessor. One more aspect will come. So residual value guaranteed by any party related or not related to the lessee. That will also come under the lessor. It will not come here. It will come under the lessor. Right. So this is the amount of lease term. Right. So this is the amount of lease payment in the books of the lessor and in the books of the lessee. I hope it is clear to all of you, friends. Now, I hope it is clear to all of you. Shruti, is it clear? Abdul, is it clear? Aksha, Kirti, Manoj. I hope it is clear to all of you. I'm going to share this Excel file to all of you. Don't worry about that. Okay. By the help of this, you will be able to understand. Right. Now, we will cover some examples. Okay. We'll cover this thing with some examples. Determining the fixed payment. Entity M means lessee and lessor A enter into a 10-year lease of an office building for fixed annual lease payment of rupees 2 lakh. Right? Lessee and lessor enters into a 10-year lease of an office building for a fixed annual lease payment of rupees 2 lakh. As per the term of the lease agreement annual fixed lease payment comprise 1,70,000 for rent and 30,000 for real estate taxes. So lessor is collecting 2 lakh rupees from the lessee, and he is saying 170 for rent and 30,000 I am charging for real estate taxes. What are the fixed lease payment for the purpose of classifying the lease? Right. In this case, if I talk about the lease component and non-lease component, right? So the 30,000 rupees which the lessor is collecting from the lessee, whether lessee is getting any goods or services out of this 30,000 of real estate taxes? Answer is no. For example, I am living in a society, I am paying a rent of 30,000 rupees and 5,000 rupees of maintenance. When I'm paying 5,000 rupees of maintenance, I'm getting some services out of that maintenance which I'm paying for 5,000 rupees. For 30,000 rupees, I'm getting a right to live in this house, in this flat. The maintenance which I'm paying is a 5,000 rupees. I'm getting a security. I'm getting a right to access the parking. I'm getting a right to access the garden. I'm getting a cleaning facility, the garden facility. I'm getting the the electrician and plumber facility, for which I'm paying a 5,000 rupees. But if I talk about this 1,70,000 plus 30,000, 2 lakh rupees, the lessee is not getting any services out of this 30,000 rupees, right? So in this case, the entire 2 lakh rupees is the fixed lease component. It is the lease component. It is not a non-lease component. It is a lease component. Since the real estate taxes are explicitly stated in the lease contract, that do not represent a separate non-lease component, as they do not provide a separate goods or services. The right to use the office building is the only component. The annual lease payment of 2 lakh represent payment relate to that lease component, right? It relates to that lease component. So in this case, 2 lakh rupees is the fixed payment, which has to be taken as a lease payment. Okay. This example is clear to all of you. You understood that. But if in the question it is written that the lessee is paying 2 lakh rupees to the lessor, 1,70,000 belongs to the use of this building and 30,000 belongs to the maintenance. In that case, the maintenance is a non-lease component, right? For use of the office, 1,70,000 is the fixed lease component. The maintenance is 30,000 is a non-lease component. 170,000 is a lease component. The maintenance you are providing for getting some services, right? It has to be charged to the P&L. Okay. Right, guys? So let's discuss this another example of in substance fixed lease payment. Entity P enters into a 5-year lease for office space with entity Q. The initial base rent is 1 lakh rupees per month. So what is the fixed lease payment? 1 lakh rupees. Rent increased by the greater of 1% of entities P's generated sales or 2% of the previous rental rate on each anniversary of the lease commencement date. So it is saying that after completion of every 1 year, the rent will increase. And what is the value of the increase? For every year, the rent will increase by greater of 1% of entity P's generated sales. For example, in the first year, the rent is 1 lakh rupees. In the next year, the rent will increase. So how this rent will increase? So 1 lakh rupees plus 1% of the last year sales. What is the 1% of last year sale? Let's say in the last year, the sale was 50,000 rupees. So what is 1% of 50,000 rupees? 500 rupees. 500 rupees is the 1% of 50,000 rupees. Okay. So 1% of lessee generated sales or 2% of the previous rent. What is my previous rent? 1 lakh rupees. So what is the 2% of 1 lakh rupees? 2,000 rupees. So which is higher? 500 rupees or 2,000 rupees? Which is higher? 2,000 rupees is higher. So in this case, the increase is 2,000 rupees. right? Let's take another example. Let's say last year the sale was, for example, 3 lakh rupees. The sale was 3 lakh rupees. So what is my 1% of 3 lakh for the purpose of increase? 1% of 3 lakh comes out to 3,000 rupees. And what is my 2% of previous rent? 2% of 1 lakh, it is 2,000. So which is higher? Whether 3,000 is higher or 2,000 is higher? Of course, 3,000 is higher. So increase is 3,000. So in the last case, where on the basis of sales, it was 500 rupees. On the basis of previous rent, it was 2,000 rupees. In this case, on the basis of previous sales, it is 3,000 rupees. On the basis of previous rent, it is 2,000 rupees. It means this 2% will always fixed, right? And since the increase is on the basis of greater, it means at a bare minimum, the lessee has to pay an increase of 2% of the last rental. Am I right? So at least lessee को 2% तो पे करना ही करना है, right? And beyond that, it will depend on the sales. मतलब अगर लेसी कोई सेल ना भी करे तो भी उसको 2% ऑफ द लास्ट रेंटल तो पे करना ही करना है, because the formula is rent increase is equal to higher of 1% of entity sales and 2% of the previous rent, right? It is higher of these two things on each anniversary of the lease commencement date. Okay, is that clear? So friends, if I'll ask you what is the in substance fixed payment in this case? So in substance fixed payment is my 2,000 rupees, right? And beyond that will be considered as a variable lease payment. So in the given case, the lease payment for the purpose of classifying the lease are the fixed monthly payment of 1 lakh rupees plus the minimum annual increase of 2% of the previous rent. Entity P is required to pay no less than a 2% increase regardless of the level of sales activity. Therefore, this minimum level of increase is in substance fixed lease payment. Are you agree with this? Is this clear or should I explain this illustration again? While calculating the lease payment, I have taken the first example of the fixed lease payment. The second example I have taken for the in substance lease payment. Is it clear to everyone? Is it clear to everyone? Yeah? Clear? Is that clear, friends? Next illustration. An entity enters into a 10-year lease of a property, right? So this is the example of variable lease payment, which depend on an index or a rate. An entity enters into a 10-year lease of a property. The lease payment for the first year is rupees 1,000. Okay. First year lease payment is 1,000. The lease payments are linked to the consumer price index. That is not a floating interest rate. Okay. So it is depending on a consumer price index. If consumer price index is increasing, it will also increase. The CPI at the beginning of the first year is rupees 100. So the consumer price index at the beginning of the first year is 100. Lease payments are updated at the end of every second year. And this increase is effected at the end of every second year. So it means for the block of 2 years, the lease payment, the lease rent will remain same. At the end of year 1, the consumer price index is 105. At the end of year 2, the consumer price index is 108. At the time of commencement of the lease, the rent was 1,000. The consumer price index was 100. This amount has to be increased after every 2 years. So it means the consumer price index after first year is irrelevant. It is given in the question to confuse you, right? It is given in the question just to confuse you. You have to consider the consumer price index after end of second year, which is 108, right? If at 100, my rent is 1000. So what will be my rent when consumer price index reaches to 108? It will be 1080. 1000 divided by 100 multiplied by 108. This lease payment will become 1080. This lease payment will become 1080. So at the lease commencement date, the lease payment are rupees 1000 per year for 10 years. The entity does not take into consideration the potential future changes in the index, right? At the end of year one, the payment have not changed and hence the liability is not updated. Okay, right? So, but at the end of year two, of course, it has to be updated by 1080. Okay, for the remaining 8 lease payments, right? So, in this case, this increase of 80 rupees is variable lease rent, which is depending on the index or rate. So this has to be taken into consideration while calculating the lease payment for the purpose of lease accounting, right? So we are discussing this lease payment accounting. So let me quickly discuss one question on the Excel file, okay? That how this lease payment works, okay? For example, lease contract is for 5 years, okay? Lease payment 10,000 every year. Escalation clause 10% every year. Okay. So exercise price at the end of lease term. At the end of lease term is, let's say, 15,000 rupees. Okay. And residual value guarantee at the end of lease term 10,000 rupees, right? So this is what which is given to the lessor. Okay. So friend, now you have to determine lease payment. Determine every year, right? So quickly I'll copy this. These are the component of my lease payment from the lessee perspective. Determine lease payment for every year in the books of lessee, right? So here I'll write year 1, okay, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. And you need to quickly help me that what should I write? Year 1, what is my fixed lease payment in year 1? In year 1, my fixed lease payment is 10,000, right? My fixed lease payment in year 1 is 10,000. This will be my fixed lease payment in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. This will be my fixed lease payment. Now, what is my in substance fixed payment? In the first year, it is 0. In the second year, 10% of this multiply by 10%, right? It will be increased by 1,000. In the second year, what is the increase? This plus this plus this plus this of 10%, multiply by 10%, right? So 2100. So here the rent is 10,000, here 11,000. So 11,000. So 11,000 ka 10%. Okay. Sorry. It should be not that. It should be last rental is equal to last rental ka 10% into 10%. Okay. Right. So it will be increased by 1100. In the next year, again, it will be increased by 1110, right? Here it will be here. So here it will be 11,000. So this 1100 is the increase. 1100 is the increase plus. So this plus last rental, this plus last increase, this plus last increase. Okay, 2100, right? Again, this plus last increase, 3310, and this plus last increase. In the last year, if I talk about the total rental, in the last year, it will be 14,000. So in the first year, 10,000, second year, 11,000, third year, 12,100, fourth year, 13,310, and in the fifth year, it is 14,641, right? So this is in substance fixed payment, which I am aware today. Variable lease payment, nothing is given in the question in this example. Exercise price in the case of a purchase option. This exercise price of 15,000 is given, but this has to be paid at the end of the lease term, which is 15,000. Termination penalty is not given in the question. Residual value guarantee, it is also come into the last year. What is the residual value guarantee given in the 10,000? What are the total lease payment? What are the total lease payment? These are the total lease payments. These are the total lease payments. Total lease payment every year. Lease payments. These are the total lease payments. Is it clear to all of you? With the help of this example, is it clear to all of you? This is how this total lease payment needs to be calculated, right? Is it clear to all of you? Clear or not clear? Is that clear? Yeah. I hope you found this example more useful and more fruitful in understanding, right? This is how this lease payment, sir. Why you have calculated the lease payment for other years also? Because when you have to do this lease accounting, you have to recognize right of use asset and lease liability on the basis of present value of the future lease rental. So when you apply present value factor in these lease rental, you have to apply the present value factor for year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For example, present value factor at the rate of 10%. I'm just giving you an example. For the first year, it will be, let's say if the lease rental is paid at the end of the year. For the first year, the present value factor is 1 divided by 1.1. For the second year, it is divided by 1.1. For the third year, it is divided by 1.1. So on and so forth, right? In this case, what is your present value of the lease payment? What is your present value of lease payments? Your present value of lease payment is this multiply by this, right? And what is the total? What is the total of this present value of the lease payment? The total is equal to sum of this total lease payments, 60,978. So what is the lease accounting? Right of use asset in the books of the lessee, account debit. Although I'll discuss this in detail, but let me give you a thought quickly so that you will be able to understand why this lease payment have been calculated, right? And what is the impact of this. So on the day one, on the commencement date, this accounting entry need to be passed in the books of the lessee. Right? Now probably you have understood the entire concept of the calculation of this lease payment. Right, friends? Abdul, the in substance fixed payment, how I have calculated. Abdul, the lease rent is 10,000, right? The lease rent is 10,000. Okay. So let me put here. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, 4 and 5. Abdul, what is the fixed rental? What is the fixed rent? It is 10,000. It is 10,000 every year, right? It is 10,000 every year. What is the rental in year 1? It will be 10,000. After increase, rental after increase. Tell me, in the first year it is 10,000 only. What will the rental after first year, which means in the second year? It will be increased by 10%, na? 10,000 multiplied by 110%. Can I say this is 110% of the last rental? It become 11,000. In the third year, again same formula I'll apply. It become 12,100, right? In the fourth year, it become 13,310. In the fifth year, it become 14,641. So what is the actual increase? What is the increase? In the first year, the increase is 0 because the base rental is same. In the second year, the increase is 1,000. In the third year, increase is 2,100. In the fourth year, increase is 3,310. In the fifth year, the increase is 4641. This is what I have calculated here. Simple. भाई आपका रेंट 10,000 है और हर साल 10% से बढ़ रहा है, तो आपका रेंट कितना हो जाएगा? पहले साल 10,000 ही होगा, दूसरे साल 11, फिर 12,100, फिर 13,310, फिर 14,641. तो आपका इंक्रीज कितना होगा? अगर मैं फिक्स्ड पेमेंट से उसको कंपेयर करूं तो पहले साल तो कुछ भी इंक्रीज नहीं हुआ, नेक्स्ट ईयर में इंक्रीज होगा. सो 1,000, 2,100, 3,310, 4641. राइट? दिस इज हाउ दिस इंक्रीज हैज टू हैपन. ओके, is that clear? Friends, I have covered this lease term and lease payment in detail. So in the next class, I will cover the few small concepts and then I'll cover the lessee accounting, the measurement, the lessee accounting in the books of the lessee, right? And that will be the most important aspect from the calculation point of view. So thank you so much, friends. I hope you have enjoyed the session and let me conclude the session for the day. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Take care.